This is basically the update to the Setessan Enchantment Aggro deck that I posted on YouTube a few days ago, quite a while ago. Um, what I found out is that first of all, I'm using Untapped now. I'll post a link in the description below so you can actually view the decks that I'm currently testing, that I'm currently playing. Then you can see my win rates with them, against what decks they're good, what decks they're bad against. Um, but now, closer to the deck, I added 3 cards in specific. The first 2 cards that I added were Hateful Eidolon and Aphemia, I don't know, the Cacophony. Basically, I added those 2 cards first out of a very simple reason. Hateful Eidolon adds us card draw, which we need because we mainly play with auras, and Aphemia gives us some form of board rebuild after a board wipe, because those tend to happen quite a bunch, especially because there are a lot of control decks in the meta. Then I added 2 Ghostforms simply because it is an enchantment, meaning that the champion will draw us a card with it. But if we put it on the champion, it's sheer impossible to remove it unless our opponent bounces it. Now, you probably already see the 43% win rate, which is sad. I know, like, I really like this deck, but I don't think that it will go too far. Here are actually the matchups that I won or lost against, and what we can quite clearly see is that control is brutal. This deck is not well matched up against control whatsoever. In fact, it tends to lose against control, and that's not because it is horrible against control, right? Because you are able to rebuild your board quite a decent amount of times, but after like 3 Teferi bounces, 2 board wipes, and a counter spell, there is not a whole lot of things that you can do. I mean, we are playing 4 Destiny Spinners um, simply so that they can no longer counterspell our stuff. But getting one of those onto the board and actually keeping them on the board is relatively hard. Also, because we are now triple colors, and I added the all of the shocklands already, means also that it is relatively hard to have all of the colors either in a hand or just when you need them, because black and green are mainly splashes. We still draw cards mainly with Angelic Gift or Setessan Champion, but Setessan Champion and Destiny Spinner are the only green cards in this deck. Yes, we could swap out the Angelic Gift with the Trample one, but I actually learned that flying is so much better than trample, simply because near to every deck has at least one flyer, something with reach, or just enough removal that they don't need to have that. And especially because Azorius control is on the uprise with that 6 mana 3/5 hexproof, we actually need a flying blocker. Azorius is actually one of our worst matchups. After that is, I believe, Simic or Temur, simply because Temur has so much ramp and removal as well with Omnath. That is just hard to keep up. But that's all said and done. I will show some gameplay right now, and hopefully we will get maybe one game against aggro and maybe one game against control, so that you actually see how this deck fares against either of those. Okay, again, I will take this into ranked because it is not a bad deck, so to speak, right? It has 4 creatures with lifelink. It has mainly what we cut were the 3 drops, right? But in the end, it's still good. Because, like, what I mean with good is that we don't really need more 3 drops, right? The 3 drops that I cut were mainly speaking the hydroic growth, or I don't know what it's called, the 2 generic and 1 green that gives the creature a counter, and then every turn it adds another counter. In fact, we see the blue-green, that usually means that it's elemental, simply because they also play the Leafkin Druid. And that's already not a great matchup for us. We are in gold now, meaning that there will be a lot more control matchups, or at least more matchups against decks that are better in the meta. And because this is the start of the meta where people figure out the extremely good control decks, Haven't really figured out the really good aggro decks yet. Maybe there aren't even that many in this meta, which could quite possibly happen. I wouldn't like for that to happen, but it might. I'm going to draw a card, put it on Destiny Spinner. They can't counter that. What usually also happens is with Brazen Borer, if they just counterspell it. Now, this is actually a tricky moment, because we could now put the Kaya's Ghostform onto our Destiny Spinner, because we don't have a third land to play the fourth land to play the champion with the Ghostform. But I would say just wing it. Angelic wing it, I guess. So again, life, thanks to the 8 creatures in total, with the life gain, there is not really a huge issue with that. We have a lot of protections for our champion right now. In total, we have... Where is it? We have 4 athletes of Life's Bounty, 2 Karametra's Blessings, and... I can't see that yet. And I think 2 Kaya's Ghost Forms. And that's bad. Straight up, there's not a whole lot to say more. We can deal 4 damage to it, and I think that's the maximum that we can do. Maybe dealing 3, and then Hateful Eidolon is better, but I think we need to deal 4 damage right now. Simply so that it upticks, it goes back to 3. And then we can kill it next turn with just 1 creature. Something like Krasis would obviously ruin our day entirely. So let's hope that he doesn't have a Krasis. A Cavalier of Thorns. That's in no shape or form better. We see him playing 2 Uros. I might try Abzan Sagas, because there is a really good black saga that allows you to destroy creatures, and especially with Nissa on the rise, and having those creatures that are basically lands, we might be able to do something. His board is already really well set up. Sadly, we didn't draw a 4th land, meaning that we could just deploy our Setessan Champion, but that would be like playing a 1/3 that doesn't do anything. And in this position, this is really ill-advised. Okay, so we actually found the all that glitters. But I have a strategy in which we probably don't even need it, because this is protection, and protection makes it so that they can't block any creature that has protection from a certain color, meaning that if we give the Destiny Spinner protection from green, the Cavalier of Thorns shouldn't be able to block it. That's my thought process right now. We could also just put the all that glitters onto this creature, but I would rather make this play and then play the Hateful Eidolon, so that if he destroys one of these creatures, I have at least some card draw. And that should be the death of his Nissa. We now still have a 3/4. I could also go for the Destiny Spinner just to have a mediocrely sized big blocker, but since his lands both are 3/3s, it doesn't matter if I have a 1/2 or a 2/3 out, especially if I don't buff them. And all that glitters right now is a lot of damage. The problem with that is to get it successfully through to his face would mean that I have to sacrifice the bounty, and that would actually also get rid of the Angelic Gift, so it would actually be smaller by 2. This is a problem. I can sacrifice it and give this protection from green. I choose to give it this protection from green because I can block a land with the Destiny Spinner, and now the Hateful Eidolon can block the Cavalier of Thorns without receiving any damage. Okay, I didn't misclick. Yay, I don't suck as much, I guess. And we're screwed. I should have given that... I don't know why I didn't see through that happening. He's basically going to bounce something every turn, meaning that there is no way we will come back. So this is a huge loss for us. We did draw our 4th land finally, meaning that we could start to draw cards. But if we put out the Setessan Champion with the Chaos Ghostform, basically that's all we could cast. We would draw 1 card, and he would gain a Setessan Champion with a Chaos Ghostform on it. And because the creature, that's also a huge issue with Hateful Eidolon, is that creatures that get exiled or bounced or taken over by the opponent don't draw you cards. It's relatively good for a board wipe because you at least get something back for the auras that you stuck onto your creatures, but it's not helpful for anything else, right? Sadly, there isn't really something for bouncing. If there is something that gives all of your enchantments hexproof, then please let me know, because I must have looked over that a lot of times. We could also go back at the end and simply check what cards we should be wary of, and if there is, and maybe check if there are some cards that would help us. It looks like that we are either facing against a mono blue flash deck, or what I would assume is a Simic Flash, simply that hasn't drawn the proper colors yet. Meaning that even if we draw a land, it's probably best to not just play the Setessan Champion. That would mean that we would slow down extremely, but he would have an Essence Scatter. Now thinking about it, if we don't play it, right, then there is a chance that he has that 2/1 Merfolk that increases every time he flashes something in, which obviously isn't great. If we do play it, he gets an Essence Scatter, and his Spectral Sailor is now a 2/2. I would rather have him have a 2/2 than have a free 2/1 and we not develop another 1/3. I understand that our hand size will get even bigger, even smaller, sorry. And there it is, the Essence Capture, yeah, we thought about it. But we do have the second Setessan Champion in our hand. I don't expect him to tap out. Depending on what we draw, we might just not play the Setessan Champion. We didn't draw anything whatsoever. We cannot actually swing in simply because he didn't do it. So we will just take this turn to play a land and say go. It looks like our opponent is maybe mono blue Flyers, mono blue Flash. Maybe there is an Azorius Splash for, again, that 6-mana drop. That's just returning to hand, which is actually beneficial to us. I don't really understand why our opponent did that, because next turn we can Setessan Champion and then play the Hateful Eidolon and draw another card, because this is an enchantment creature. All of the cards that I added, they are enchantments, even the Aphemia, that weird looking bird person. Yeah, that's its name now. I'm not going to remember that whatsoever. But that is also an enchantment which exiles enchantments from our graveyard to draw us cards. Here we have our 5th land. I probably should have waited, because we could have drawn another land, which doesn't hurt us. But we still have 1 white and 1 black. Welp. There was no point in tapping differently. We could have waited with the land, which would have resulted in us maybe having another thing left. Again, we do have a bunch of life-linking creatures. Enchanting the Eidolons is not necessarily the worst option, but it's also not the best option. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to or if I'm not supposed to. I will jump with the Hateful Eidolon, I think, and then I will put the Karametra's Blessing onto it, just to get rid of it. Creatures and enchantments you control have spells your opponents cast that target this permanent. Okay, here comes the counterspell. Yep, it's not that bad that we lose that Eidolon. The main thing that we have to keep is our Setessan Champion. We're actually going to wait and play the Cacophony, weird-looking bird person. I remembered. First, simply so to maybe bait out counterspell. Now we are putting this on the champion simply to just keep it. And here is our thing to stop him from casting counterspells. We are in no shape or form in a hurry, simply because he basically, with only flyers, deals 1 damage to us. We are fine with exiling most of the times enchantments from our graveyard, simply because if we have to cast this like 5 times, then I would rather get another 2/2. That's just how it is. I'm fine with blocking this way, simply because there is a Kaya's Ghostform on it. If he has a bounce, then he has a bounce. There's nothing I can do against that. Not even the Kaya's Ghostform is going to do anything against it. I don't know if I think he miscalculated, and that was a shame concede. Which, yay, I guess. I take that as a win. MTGA counts it as a win, so that's a win for my deck, I would say. Yay. We are now 2 games in. We had 1 control, 1 more aggro-y matchup. So I would actually say let's check the cards, right? And mainly we should probably go towards the deck folder, duh. And here we have a better look at the deck, how it consists, and I can point maybe the things out that I think that need to stay and things that might need to get changed. So this card is insanely powerful. I should have considered that way early already before I made the Celestia option and maybe gone directly to the Abzan version. But simply putting a 2-mana 2/1 flying down with another body, meaning that if they, for example, have a Teferi and they bounce 1 creature of ours, if this creature had an aura on it, that aura is going to go to the graveyard. And playing this now gives us 2 bodies, even if our opponent has 1 blocker, which they usually do with that new white saga. It doesn't matter as much, simply because we have a flying attacker. If they have a flyer, we have something on the ground. Now we have also 2 different bodies that we can enchant with different things. Our main problems are that we don't play a lot of removal. We don't play removal at all, actually. But the problem is, if we look, like just exile, for example, there aren't really that many options for us, right? Like, this only gets rid of enchantments, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if our opponent is mainly playing the gods, for example, in that mono-green matchup. But then there's nothing that we can do for the Nissa Planeswalker. Another option would be the Conclave Tribunal, but that would probably fit better in the Celestia version with that green-white creature that makes new 1/1s. Then this would be Graveyard Hate. I don't think that it's necessary, because it's 1/1 card draw or a life gain. We are really good against aggro simply because we have a 1/2 on 1 mana, which is already really good for a stat line. We have a 2/3 on 2 mana, which is again really good on stat line. It blocks all the knights. It technically blocks all of the knights unless they are buffed in some shape or form. So this is actually the enchantment, that the saga that I talked about. So maybe I'll try an Absent saga. Maybe I'll try actually the Temur and Temur Elemental deck next. But this is really powerful. Sadly, it's also only against aggro again. There really aren't that many options for control matchups simply to hinder them. At least I don't see them. This would be a 4-mana creature, meaning that we would have to do something for our curve, simply because we can't just play down a 4. It is a 4-mana 4 for flying. That's not the stat line that's the problem. It's mainly speaking the actual cost, that it's 4 mana. There is no issue with it. With playing 4-mana cards, especially in an aggro deck, it happens, for example, the Loxodon, but you can cheat those costs, and that's the huge issue. If you want to take this deck into BO3, first of all, I don't advise it, simply because it's not fairly well set up, but the cards that I could imagine that would work quite good would be Agonizing Remorse. It gets rid of basically everything they have in their hand. It only costs 2 mana. It's really efficient. than if we go and actually search for enchantment and loads good. Then you could put in some POS Wayfarer for even a more aggro style effect and less of value driven with the champion. You could take out either the Karametra's Blessings and Kaya's Ghostforms. Another card that you could get entirely rid of is the Dawn Evangel. You could get rid of 2 of these to play 4 of her. Is it a she? Is it a she or an it? I don't know. I will call it whatever comes to my mind at that point. But something really important probably would be the Eidolon of Obstruction, because it also hoses aggro because it is first strike, but it also at least slows down control because it is no longer possible for a Teferi to come down on turn 3 and bounce this back to your hand. Sadly, there is not really a lot of space for it if we are playing BO1. We could remove the Dawn Evangel to play the Eidolon of Obstruction, but again, this dude is not necessarily card draw, but he's card advantage. We have a lot of card advantage card, and our main issue isn't so much that the saturation of our deck, it's more the removal. We have a really hard time of removing the different parts of a control deck. Again, we could play more Banishing Lights, maybe get rid of the Dawn Evangel. This is the card that I think that is the easiest to cut if you still want to have the insane card draw option of the Setessan Champion. You could probably play 3 Kaya's Ghostforms and only 2 Sentinel Eyes. They're both commons, so if you have only 5, then I guess it's preference for you. But otherwise, I don't really see a whole lot of cards that could be beneficial to the stack. I guess this would be a more aggro version of Sentinel Eyes, simply because it gives more attack power. You have to be careful because you can't equip this to the bounty, but otherwise it works just fine. But yeah, I think I'm not sure that this deck could go any further than I have pushed it already. I mean, aggro-wise, you can take this in a control manner way further, at least from a surviving standpoint, and probably even a facing control matchup standpoint, because then you could play these removal spells from your in your actual main deck, because it would simply be a decent strategy. You could still play the Hateful Eidolon or the bounties. You don't need to, obviously. I would actually rather cut the hateful ones instead of the bounties, simply because the bounties actually protect your creatures. You could cut black or green. I wouldn't cut green because of the champion, but you can cut black fairly easily in this deck. If you have any points that you want to add to this deck, please leave it in the comments below. Maybe there is a way to still improve this deck. I would gladly test it out because I really like this. Not necessarily archetype, but I like this way of playing with auras. It was not really something that we were able to do in the past expansions. And having access to this many also synergistic auras to actually form a proper board is something really cool, and I like to play with it. I think everything else has been said. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you didn't enjoy the video, obviously leave a dislike. That's what the button is for. And maybe tell me what you didn't enjoy, what you did enjoy, what I could do better, what I did good. All of those things would be pretty helpful criticism in the comments down below. And yeah, thanks for watching.